Miss Dando, presenter of the BBC CrimeWatch programme, was murdered on her own doorstep in Fulham in West London.
Everybody knew Jill. Her public and her private personas were exactly the same. She really was a warm and lovable person. She had no side to her. She wasn't a prima donna. She was a member of a team. She mucked in, and those were the qualities alongside that sweet-natured elegance that attracted the audience to her.
Was Jill Dando killed because of her work with CrimeWatch? Don't have nightmares. Do sleep well. Jill Wendy Dando was a kind person and well-liked. She was born on November 9th, 1961, at Ashcombe House Maternity Home in Weston-super-Mare, Somerset, to Jack Dando and Winifred Mary Jean Hockey. Jill has a brother named Nigel. Jill was raised as a Baptist and remained a devout follower. When she was 3 years old, it was discovered that she had a hole in her heart and a blocked pulmonary artery. As a result, she had heart surgery on January 12, 1965. She went to Worrell Infant School, Greenwood Junior School, Worrell Comprehensive School, and Broad Oak Sixth Form Center, where she was head girl. She studied journalism at South Glamorgan Institute of Higher Education in Cardiff. Jill was a member of Weston-super-Mare Amateur Dramatic Society, Exeter Little Theatre Company. She appeared in plays at the Barnfield Theatre. In 1979, she was a volunteer at Sunshine Hospital Radio in Weston-super-Mare. Jill's first job was as a trainee reporter for the Weston Mercury, a local newspaper company where her father and brother worked. After 5 years, she started to work for the BBC, becoming newsreader for BBC Radio Devon in 1985. That year, she transferred to BBC Southwest and presented a regional news magazine program, Spotlight Southwest. In 1987, she worked for Television Southwest, then BBC Spotlight in Plymouth. In early 1988, Jill moved to national television in London to present BBC television news, specifically the short on-the-hour bulletins that aired on both BBC One and BBC Two. Jill presented the BBC television program Breakfast Time, Breakfast News, the BBC 1 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news, the travel program Holiday.
Hello! No, as they used to say, do not adjust your set. Tonight, we have a very special edition of Holiday.
The Crime Appeal series, CrimeWatch, and occasionally Songs of Praise. She moved to Fulham in 1994. From 1989 to 1996, Jill dated BBC executive Bob Wheaton. She then had a brief relationship with National Park Warden Simon Basil. Jill was among those with the highest profile of the BBC's on-screen staff and had been the 1997 BBC Personality of the Year. In December of 1997, Jill went on a blind date with gynecologist Alan Farthing. The date went well, and the two continued to see each other. Alan, who had been separated from his wife at the time, finalized his divorce a few months later. On January 3, 1999, Jill and Alan announced their engagement, which was set for September 25th of that year. On April 25, 1999, Jill presented the first episode of Antiques Inspectors. She was scheduled to present the 6 o'clock news on the evening of the following day. She was also featured on the cover of that week's Radio Times magazine. She was also booked to host the British Academy Television Awards alongside Michael Parkinson at Grosvenor House Hotel on May 9th. On the morning of April 26, 1999, 37-year-old Jill left her Alan's home in Cheswick. She drove to her house in Fulham, which was a little over 40 minutes away. She had lived in the house by April 1999, was in the process of selling it, and did not visit it frequently. It was about 11:32 a.m., and as Jill was about to put her keys in the lock to open the front door, she was grabbed from behind. With their right arm, the assailant held her and forced her to the ground, that her face was almost touching the tiled step on the porch. Then, with their left hand, they fired a single shot at her left temple, killing her instantly. The bullet entered her head just above her ear, parallel to the ground, and came out the right side of her head. This all happened within about 30 seconds of Jill getting out of her car and approaching the front door. Jill had been shot by a bullet from a 9mm short-caliber semi-automatic pistol. The cartridge appeared to have been subject to workshop modification, possibly to reduce its charge. According to a British intelligence expert, the gun was placed so close to Jill's head that the gases escaping the barrel of the gun exploded inside her head and muffled the sounds of the gunshot. This also prevented blood splatter from getting on the murderer. Richard Hughes, her next-door neighbor, heard a surprised cry from Jill, like someone greeting a friend. Hughes looked out of his front window and, while not realizing what had happened, made the only certain sighting of the killer. A white man was walking away from Jill's house. He was well dressed with dark hair and a solid build. He was 6 foot tall, around 40 years old, and wearing a dark Berber jacket and possibly had a cell phone. Jill's body was discovered about 14 minutes after she was shot by her neighbor, Helen Doble. Police were called 11:47 a.m. Jill was taken to the nearby Charing Cross Hospital, where she was declared dead on arrival at 1:03 p.m. After the murder, an investigation by the Metropolitan Police Operation Oxborough began. Within 6 months, they had spoken to more than 2,500 people and had taken more than 1,000 statements. The possibility of Jill's murder being a contract killing was thought of first, but since she was living with her fiancé and was only rarely visiting her Fulham residence, it was considered unlikely that a professional assassin would have been sufficiently well informed about her movements to have known at what time she'd be going to be there. CCTV evidence of Jill's last journey did not show any signs of being followed. It was also argued that a professional assassin would not use such a poor quality weapon. The police began to entertain the idea that the killing had been carried out by a crazed individual acting on an opportunistic basis. This is what led them to Barry. Little progress was made within the first year, so the police concentrated their attention on Barry George. Barry lived about a half a mile from Jill's house and had a history of stalking women and sexual offenses. He was put under surveillance, arrested on May 25, 2000, and charged with Jill's murder on May 28. Immediately after Jill's murder, a number of telephone calls were made to the BBC and other media outlets claiming responsibility for the killing on behalf of Serb groups. Callers spoke with Central European accents and threatened further killings. These calls were mainly seen as hoaxes. However, Barry's defense barrister, Michael Mansfield, QC, proposed that Serbian warlord leader Arkan had ordered Jill's assassination in retaliation for the NATO bombing of radio television of Serbia's headquarters on April 23, 1999. Mansfield suggested that Jill's earlier presentation of an appeal for aid Kosovar Albanian refugees may have attracted the attention of Bosnian Serb hardliners. An opposition journalist was assassinated outside his home in Belgrade just a few days before Jill's murder, and the method used in both cases was identical. Barry was tried, convicted, and on July 2, 2001 was sentenced to life imprisonment. Barry appealed twice. Both were unsuccessful, but after discredited forensic evidence was excluded from the prosecution's case, Barry's third appeal succeeded in November of 2007. The second trial, lasting 8 weeks, ended in Barry's acquittal on August 1, 2008. So if Barry didn't kill Jill, who did? Cold case reviews by the police after 2008 have concluded that Jill was killed by a professional assassin in a hard contact execution. Conservative MP Patrick Mercer was reported as saying, "It had all the hallmarks of covert forces. The killer even used special tailored ammunition, which was a Serbian assassination trademark and something I saw when I was over there."
Don't have nightmares, do sleep well. Good night.
Good night.